Check. Good. So I'm Max Ceron. Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding podcast. Today we have a really cool guest. Welding podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as always, I'm out there scouring the nation and the globe for the most interesting stories I can find. Today, I have a wonderful person who's been an elusive species to get on the show, but I have her today, and I'm not letting her go. We have Daniela Todaro, who is the current president of Quality Plates and Profiles Limited. Daniela, how are you doing?
I'm wonderful, Max. How about you?
I'm doing great. And, I know you already know this, and I know our listeners probably already know this, but I'm surrounded by Danielas. So my right-hand woman, Daniela Torelli, is, I wouldn't, the company wouldn't be as successful without her, to be honest. And you, Daniela Todaro, last year when we were working together on projects, there was a lot of confusion between all the DTs out there.
Hey, it's a wonderful place to be, Max. So, I wouldn't be upset by it.
Well, and my daughter's name is Daniela. So, there's Daniela's there. It's a beautiful name. Let's just say that.
Thank you.
So, Daniela, I've met you through AWMI, which we're going to get to. We've had a number of people from AWMI on the show now. We're big supporters. We are corporate sponsors now. We're upping our tier this year, actually. I think we're going to gold to be better supporters of the great organization. But
that's wonderful.
But for yourself, for the people that don't know who Daniela is, let's start with your backstory. So, to be president of such a fantastic company, how the heck did you start? Where are you from? Where were you born? Where's your roots?
Yes, I often wonder that myself. Born and raised here in Ontario, Canada. I started actually very humble beginnings. I hate to admit it, but I started 21 years ago in this industry. It makes me feel old, but I'm not. I started very simply keying orders for trucking and for a big service center and scheduling logistics, right? Very, very simple stuff. I had an aptitude to want to learn the business. I dived in. I was very vocal about what I wanted, maybe at sometimes too much so.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm here today. And I think having that vision, having, that laser focus on what it is that I wanted to achieve helped me along my path.
Well, it's crazy because I see two kind of opposing angles here. First of all, how did you get into trucking logistics? I mean, that's not something on the pegboard in grade 5 when they're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to do logistics for trucking. So what was the connection that pulled you into that industry in the first place? Did you go to school for logistics or management? What was 17-year-old Daniela thinking in high school, thinking she was going to be?
It's funny you asked that. I wanted to be, a big corporate CEO at the time. And I don't think my dream has changed much in that regard. How I got in, really just networking. It's about, reaching out to people that and funny enough, they said, yeah, I have a job in customer service. And so I started through college. I started, working and learning businesses and, just kind of found my way into things, right? I would ask a lot of questions and I still ask a lot of questions. And, I found my way into logistics because I would propose ideas, right? And I would say,
Mm-hmm.
well, what if we did it this way? And what if we tried something a little bit different? And I've had some really good leaders over the years that listened, right? And said, you know what, I think you might be good at this. Why don't you try your hand? So a lot of people, put their trust in me, which I think is really important. And then I had to prove them right? I couldn't fail.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just jump in, dive in. And so, yes, logistics taught me a lot. It is probably one of the most thankless jobs. You can never keep everybody happy. There's always something failing or falling through the seams, right? So logistics is not an easy place to start, but it taught me a lot on determination and perseverance. And then once I got that under the belt, it was just what else is next, right? And I think that's the key thing in my career path, was always pushing and finding that next level, always trying to challenge myself into the next role, and always looking forward, right? So for me, it was not just about the role I'm doing, but it was, what's the next one above this one? So as I'm perfecting what I'm doing currently, how do I prepare for what's coming after this? Because once you get to that essential part where you become an expert at what you're doing, then it's it's so difficult at that point to then start preparing for what's next, right? Because you can become really good. So I think that was always, for me, that was always what I did, is I always just jumped into things and kind of went, I'm going to trust in my ability to figure this out. And I did.
How do you find that cycle, that ebb and flow of build, grow, jump? Because I find that I like that cycle myself. I feel like all, people that have gotten to, upper management, senior leadership roles have kind of a similar backstory where it's like they started somewhere, learned to do it really well, but at some point you got to realize that I got to jump. And you don't have to, because you could be very happy doing that job very well for the rest of your life. Probably be paid well, everything would be fine, food on the table. But there was something in Daniela that, you're learning logistics. And logistics, I will tell you, I agree, is thankless, because the only time you ever think of logistics is when it's wrong. When it's going right, when logistics is good, you don't care. Things are where they're supposed to be. When logistics is wrong, that's when suddenly you're mad at somebody, right? Now, for yourself, you get into this. Number one, it's already an extremely male-dominated world, trucking. You get into the logistics side, you start voicing your opinions, you start getting that trust, that growth. At what point do you start thinking, maybe I'm capping out, or maybe I'm looking for the next thing?
So for me, it's always been self-awareness, right? I think self-awareness is very key, knowing who you are. And the funny thing is, once you figure out who you are, you eventually grow, right? So as the years go by, you become and evolve into a different person than you were before. So it's always about continuously understanding what it is that you want. And that changes over time, right? So for me, having that goal of where I wanted to get to has been kind of like the lighthouse or the guiding star, right? It's been my beacon that I could follow over the years. So I've always been under the philosophy that if you build a really strong foundation for yourself, it's going to get you places. And I've always wanted to know how the job was done, even if I wasn't directly involved in the job itself. I dived into it, right? I wanted to dissect it, and I wanted to understand it, because there's, even today, there's nothing that I would ask somebody to do that I don't fully understand what it is I'm asking for, right? So for me, it's just a curious nature, right? And I think I always kind of ask a lot of questions. Some people help you out, some people don't, and that's okay. And I've never been one that shied away from asking just because I was going to get a no. It just meant I asked somebody else.
Well,
right?
There's an old saying: if you don't ask, you don't get. Right? Pretty simple.
Well, exactly, and I think that's key. But I think it took me a while to learn that. That was not something I understood from a young age. I have a little bit of a traditional kind of upbringing in terms of keep your head down, work really hard. Somebody's going to notice you. So as much as I do put my hand up for projects and I do voice ideas, I wasn't always the one that was saying, look at what I accomplished, right? And look at how much I achieved. I assumed that it was being recognized over the years. And I think, that was a bit of a deterrent in my growth at certain points. And when I started to realize that you needed to be your own advocate, right, then things starting to move a little bit faster for me. And I think that is key, especially with women. We don't necessarily advocate as much as our male counterparts. And I think, by the way, advocating for yourself is good, right? I know there was always a negative connotation on advocating for yourself. Everybody's like, well, you got to be humble. And it's not that you're not being humble. It's just letting people know what you've accomplished. And actually, a really good mentor of mine, she once told me, she said, are you updating your resume every year? And I looked at her and I'm like, no, why would I update my resume every year? That seems like such a tedious task. And she's like, because every year you accomplish a whole bunch of things that you set out to do. And she said, do you keep track of what you accomplish? And I had a really hard look at myself and I went, well, I know them. She's like, but no, do you put them down on paper and then do you show your boss? Right. And I was really taken aback by that because I thought, you know what, I'm not doing that. I'm like, but he knows. And she says, no. She says, it is something to know something, but then to actually have it in writing. Right. And she's like, keep track of it. And she goes, celebrate what you've accomplished, especially if you've hit off a lot of key goals that you had. It's very important for you and for your growth. And I followed it every single day since she told me that. And we had that conversation. I've been following that.
I love that. Back home, I'm from Chile. There's a saying, throw yourself a parade. It's a concept of, it's okay to celebrate. It's okay to celebrate, and celebrating a win is something that doesn't need to be done alone. You can celebrate wins with people around you. And it also sort of exposes the people that are your supporters, because, if you're like, hey, I did this awesome thing, the supporters are all gonna be like, hooray, good job. But the people that aren't supporters are gonna be like, oh, they're not humble, they're not this, they're bragging. But that's also good to have those people on the radar, right? Like, it's good to know, also who's maybe gonna be not on team you, right?
Absolutely. It took me a long time to realize that too, right? It is so important to find out who your support team is. And it's actually not difficult, right? When you start paying attention to other people and you're 100% right. The ones that are congratulating you and reaching out to you and saying that was fantastic versus, the ones that you never hear from. I mean, it's as simple as that. And, really kind of surrounding yourself with the right people. And I think, you hit the nail on the head right there is who you surround yourself with is equally as important as, the technical side of it or learning the skill part of advancing in your career. It's your community, right? It's your environment. It's what, and a lot of us always say environment, right, is something, we're thrown into, but it's not. It's something that we choose, and we don't realize the power we have in making that choice.
100%.
Right. It's, a lot of people say, well, that's the culture and that's just, this is just the way things are. But each of us have the choice to make it different for ourselves.
That's right. I love that. Now, you said you came from a traditional sort of family. In that family structure, what are they thinking, your family, your mom, dad, your sisters, brothers, whatever you have, at you getting into this trades realm? You get into trucking, into logistics. And I mean, I wouldn't put you at over 5'1". Maybe I'm kind of, it might be a stretch there, a young woman getting into these kind of rough and tumble areas, and you're coming in with kind of a mission. You're kind of an arrow shooting out of a bow. What was your family thinking of your career path and choices?
So first of all, your accuracy on the height is amazing.
I'm only 5'5", so I know us short kings, kings and queens.
Small but mighty is what everybody keeps telling me, so I'm just going to go with that. So my family thought I was absolutely nuts. My family is a bunch of entrepreneurs that own their own business and don't have a boss. And when I came out of high school and I said to them, listen, I want the corporate life. They all looked at me like like, who is this child? And she doesn't belong to us any longer. And like, where did she come from? But I said, no, I fell in love with the structure and, just the grandness of being in a corporation, the different levels, the complexity of achieving the different levels. It all appealed to me. And I said, you know what? I've watched everybody around me, and it's funny, even my husband's family. I mean, they all own their own businesses, surrounded by people in private sector, right? And so, I am kind of the one that is often misunderstood in my family. But yeah, they eventually over time realized, right? I mean, I started very entry level position, and I honestly thought they thought I wasn't going places, but they saw the climb, they saw the determination, they saw me every day in, day out, making progress, and doing it quite rapidly, right? And so they realized, you know what, I think she found her path in life. And so now, now they're very proud of me. I hear it all the time from my parents. They can't be more proud. They still have no clue a lot of times why I put up with what I do or what I do. But I know they're very happy for me.
Yeah, I'm not even sure my parents even know what I do, to be honest. But for you, once you decide that you want to go corporate, which I mean is a decision. I didn't make that decision until I was in my 30s, and I had been a business owner, and I had been an entrepreneur, and I had worked in both for people and for myself. But still, the thought of being corporate, going for those C-suites, those things, that's a whole nother game, right? That's a whole nother game. And when I decided to make that choice, and I mean, I guess that's kind of a lie. I had a company kind of make that choice for me. They were like, you have these skills, you need to climb up. But I was lacking a lot of the education coming from trades industry, and I had to go back to school, night school, to learn a bunch of stuff because there's a lot of skills to work within the executive world that you don't get out of university. You don't get it, working on the floor. Where did you start picking up these skills to navigate the corporate world? Because they are a different set of skills.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes you don't realize it, kind of the political arena that you're stepping into at times. But you learn as you go. You find the right people that, like I said, your supporters we talked about. Those will really help you navigate through. I've always been big on learning. I take certificate programs. I do like Harvard Business Online. I'm always learning. If I can jump into a program, I will. But for me, it's about really understanding the gap between what I'm doing and what I want to do, right? So moving, into different areas that I'm not comfortable with is important for me, right? And it's important for me to find people that are currently in those roles. So I reach out to a lot of people in the roles, and then I really start building that relationship with them, and I start understanding how it is that they go about their day. One of the things that I think, a lot of us do is we always want to reach for the next position. If you're not in management, you want to get into management. If you're not in a director, you want to get into a director position. But a lot of us don't understand what it entails, right? So when we get there, you look back and you go, oh, this is not at all what I want to do.
I thought I would be solving the problems I had instead of just having a whole new list of problems on my table that I never even thought of.
Right. And so I think for me, it's about understanding the good and the bad of the role, right? And I don't want to just hear good things. I want to understand, like, what is a day-to-day? What do you have to deal with? What are your struggles? What are your challenges? And I really, when I find these people that open up to me, and there's a lot of people actually that are willing to open up about their roles, not just gloss over and tell me, all the good stuff about it, but really say, well, this is what my day looks like. Yeah. And then when I dissect that and I go, okay, so this is the role, this is the challenge. And funny thing about me is I seem to like to gravitate towards the challenge, right? So the bigger the challenge presented in front of me, the odds are that I'm going to get drawn closer and closer to it. So that for me is, I think, navigating corporate is really just about understanding it, right? And like I said, you don't have to do every single role, but to have a good understanding of how it intertwines. The other thing too that I found very helpful is I'm an introvert by nature. I've taken so many tests, and I've come out introverted almost every single time. My son likes to say, well, you kind of toggle the line. You're an introvert, but you do really well in social settings. I said, well, thank you. I've learned to become an extrovert. But by nature, I like quiet and I like solitude and I like to think. So I have been able to come out of my shell because I read a lot about it, and I invest my time to practice, as I like to call it, right?
Yeah,
sometimes
to work
practice,
on it.
But you have to work on it. And when you come out of, like, sometimes I come out of these big social events and I am so drained, and you see other people that are extroverted that are ready to go, like they are just pumped and excited, and it builds them up. So I know where my limitations are, and because of that, I pair myself up with extroverted people, and I keep extroverted people around me because I rely on that as a strength, right? So extroverted people are great because they're great connectors. I mean, they can connect you to so many people around you. And that's what I do, right? And so in order to navigate kind of that corporate chain, you really do need to understand it. And I think not just from your level, from all levels.
Right. Well, let's go back in time now because I want to see the continuity of this timeline. So, how long were you in the logistics gig with the trucking company?
Actually, it was through a service center that I did their logistics. It was pretty straightforward. I had 2 trucks at the time. I went one truck went one way, one truck went the other, and then of course there was all kinds of issues in between. But soon we grew. The fleet got bigger and bigger and larger. So I was there for, I would want to say, about a year before I started moving into other areas of the company. And I think that's key, right? Is the timeline, especially when you have a goal and you have a goal as big as my goal is. You need to understand that you cannot spend 3 to 5 years in each one of these positions, because if you do, you're never going to achieve it. You're just going to run out of years. So for me, it was a matter of, being in it, understanding it. And sometimes I would take things on the side, right? So I couldn't necessarily, it'd be ideal if all of a sudden you learned it and then you gave it up. And, timing doesn't always work that way. And companies really don't want you moving around because it just causes them chaos because they have to find your replacement.
Disruption,
But for me, sometimes it was adding, right? So adding additional tasks to my plate, being able to, so once you master something, once you get, or it doesn't have to be masterful, once you get really comfortable with something, you get good and you got a routine and you got a rhythm. For me, it was always about, well, can I do something else? Like, is there something else I can do? Can you add something? And, and it was about, I really quickly started supervising teams, right? And they said, okay, well, if you could do that, like, let's get you over here. And then so I started managing actually and supervising at an extremely young age in my early 20s, right? Which is, first of all, was not easy to do because I was growing as a person myself in my career, but then I was also responsible for others. However, it did teach me a lot. I remember saying at the time, I just need a moment to work on myself because I'm working on a team and I have a team that I'm responsible for. And then there was a period in my life where I didn't have a team any longer, and man, did I miss it. Yeah. And the only thing I wanted was to have people to help develop it. And for me, leadership is extremely important because I know that it's a privilege to be a leader, right? It's not a right. I mean, you get to the level that I'm at, you really want to work with people. You really want to develop people. I've seen a lot of leaders that get to this position and they don't find any enjoyment from people. No, and I think
they're coasting.
They're in the wrong place. Yeah. So for me, it's about the type of leader I want to be, and I'm always learning. I like self-help books. I like learning about different leadership styles. When I bring managers on, the first thing I say is, okay, so you need to pick your leadership style. And they look at me and are like, what are you talking about, my leadership style? And I said, there's so many out there. There's so many books that you can read on what type of style that fits you best. And I said, once you understand your style of leadership, right, and the type of leader you want to be, I said, then it becomes easier, right? And so for me, I'm very much like a servant leader. I like developing people. That is the most enjoyment I get out of my day is watching people grow and challenging them to hit their full potential, right? And so I take that very seriously in everything that I do.
That's awesome. I literally have my behavioral report in front of me right here because I do them on myself periodically just to see how I've been changing as a person, to see if there's gaps in my style of leadership, because it has evolved as I've gotten older. And for yourself, you got into leadership young. So I feel like leaders need to lead. It's just either not everyone is built to lead and not everyone is meant to lead. Not everybody wants to lead. So when you have someone that wants it, is built for it, and it is going down that path, you want to support them. You want them to be the leaders because we need them, right? For yourself to get into this role so young, you must have had pushback. You must have had some, some 40-year-olds that are like, I'm not letting this 21-year-old tell me what to do. Who are you? How did you deal with that as a young person, or even today for reality's sake? But as a leader, how do you deal with the pushbackers?
If we could talk about adversity and the challenges I've had to face, that would be a whole nother podcast for another day. But I think the key there is, there's numerous times in my career where I was probably almost fired. But the determination, right? And like I said, it's a matter of knowing what you want, and it's a matter of, finding a path to it. Sometimes the direct path is not always available. There's too many obstacles in it. But then you look to go around, right? And so there's always other options on things. And sometimes it's completely blocked and you have to shift gears. There's been times in my career where the path I thought was going to get me to where I wanted to be didn't, right? And I had to pivot. I literally had to go back to the drawing board and said, this is not working. What else can I do? Where can I go? But it's understanding when you're roadblocked, right? Because it happens. It happens, yeah. And there's sometimes there's no way around it as much as you want to try. And I'm a fighter, right? So for me, it's like I will go to the very end, right? I don't like failure. But I really, I understood at a certain point that it's not failure. It's failure if I continue to stay when I know there is no hope of moving forward, right? Yeah. So I think that for me was essential, is knowing when to shift the environment, because the environment won't shift.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've said it a million times on this podcast. I actually don't even believe in failure. I went to university for philosophy, and the concept of failure is something that's very modern and created by humans to basically put things down. In nature, failure doesn't exist. Nature is not a natural concept, right? It's something that we've created as humans. So for me, failure is not even on the board. It's either you tried and you got your outcome that you wanted, or you didn't get the outcome you wanted, but you got an outcome. There was an outcome. It may not have been what you wanted, but what did you learn? How far off were you? Exactly. What are the processes? Because you make the corrections you need to. Now, I think that in a lot of ways, you and I are sisters, because I generally stay at most companies. And this is me looking back at my career now, 5 to 7 years. It's kind of like my window that I'm with companies, and not because I leave companies angry or upset, or I've never burnt a bridge. Every company I've been with has been good, but I get to a point where I've worked the systems out. I got it running smooth. Everything's cool, and I'm starting to get bored, which is not a fun feeling for me when I'm a hyper person. So it's like I should be happy in my chair being like, everything's running smooth, but I go the opposite way. I'm like, I need to do something else. Like I got to find that next challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm the exact same way. It's funny. The minute I get bored, I know that's time, right? That is my trigger. Is as soon as I get bored, I always say it's like things run too smoothly. And then, I'm bored, right? I want to find the challenge. I'm always chasing the challenge because I know that when I'm bored, I'm not growing. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a key, is understanding yourself and understanding what motivates you. But you're right. I mean, for me, it's the exact same thing, as I need that constant challenge to keep pushing me forward. Otherwise it's I don't feel useful. I don't feel like I'm living up to my full potential.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of this might be a great time for a break, but in your continuity or your timeline here, when did you get into the steel industry? Because, this is how I know you, is your connection to the steel trades. At what point in your career did you make that jump into the steel trades?
So I always say to people, I would jokingly say to people that there's two ways to get into the steel industry. Either you know somebody and they make you come in, they force you in, or you accidentally fall into the steel industry and you can't find your way out. So I'm the second. I'm the second part. Like, I wasn't looking to get into the steel industry. Believe it or not, it was an ad that I saw posted, and it was like 7 kilometers from home. And I thought, okay, let's try this out. You got to start somewhere after school, right? And once you build up the knowledge, I think there's so much potential to the steel industry, because I feel like even though it's slow to evolve, there's so much potential here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the unkept secret, or like it's why aren't more people coming into the steel industry? There's lots of jobs here. Yes, there's a lot of adversity at times too, but there's just so much for young people in this industry, right? So like I said, I kind of fell in. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but 21 years later, I'm still here and I haven't left. And it's funny because a lot of people who know me say, I would never picture you doing that. And I said, yeah, neither did I. But yet here I am.
Well, I think the key takeaway is that hopefully, fingers crossed, this next whole generation of people, your age and under, now have an example of, I can see myself in that job. If people are looking at you, Daniela, and saying, I would have never seen you as CEO of a major company in the steel industry. Well, hopefully you've changed that bias for the next generation, and people will say, I do have an example of a strong, independent woman who's a CEO of a steel company. I saw her on a podcast. I saw her at a conference. I saw her at a thing. Because it's always easier to be what you can see, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to, it's really hard to dig out your own niche independently. That is a lifetime of work. But to see a path laid out already, that makes it so much easier for someone else to continue down that same road, right?
No, absolutely, but not CEO yet. Almost, not quite there.
Not president.
Still got some years ahead of me to achieve that level for sure. But I'm working on it, and that's the great thing, is I've got a lot of mentors that are helping me try to achieve that. And I take of course, I do a lot of reading. But you're right. Getting into this industry, it was such a challenge because there weren't a lot of women, right, in those executive roles. It was tough. There was a lot of women in kind of, I call it the middle level, in your sales and your purchasing and your HR
functions, admin,
your accounting, right, your admin. But there wasn't a lot in the executive level. So it's funny, every boss I've had has been male until recently, when I've made this shift. Our CEO over at Canorector, which is a parent company for Quality Plates and Profiles, is a woman, right? And this is the first time that I've actually had to report up to a woman, who then reports into another woman, and it's fantastic. It is such a breath of fresh air. Not saying that my male counterparts haven't helped. I mean, I've got here somehow, right?
No, it would be like me stumbling into a job where my boss is Spanish and I can speak my first language. There's a inherent comfort there for being with someone with the same background, race, ethnicity, whatever, gender, right?
Absolutely. And what I'm saying there is, it's refreshing to see that it's changing. It's refreshing to see that, there are more women that are getting into the industry, which is nice. And like you said, if you can see it, you can be it. I've often said that line. It is so incredibly important, right? So, for me, I'm very lucky to have found the environment I am right now. And like I said, I'm 4.5 months in on the job. It's very early beginnings for me.
All right. Well, let's take our break now for our advertisers. And when we get back from the break here, we're going to get into Daniela's role with her company, what she does, how she got there. And then also we're going to talk about her involvement with AWMI, which is how I met her. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on the CWB Association podcast.
The CWB Association is new and improved and focused on you. We offer a free membership with lots of benefits to anyone interested in joining an association that is passionate about welding. We are committed to educating, informing, and connecting our workforce. Gain access to your free digital publication of the Weld magazine, free online training, conferences, and lots of giveaways. Reach out to your local CWB Association chapter today to connect with other welding professionals and share welding as a trade in your community. Build your career, stay informed, and support the Canadian welding industry. Join today and learn more at cwbassociation.org.
And we are back here on the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and I'm here with Daniela Todaro, coming to us from the GTA. I think you're in the GTA. I just assumed, but where are you right now?
Right now, we Quality Placement Profiles actually out in just outside of Guelph in Pushland,
Oh, okay, cool, cool.
just outside of the GTA.
All right, all right. So thank you for being with me today. Right before the break, we were talking about, uh, the trajectory of your career, right? Now, before this job with Quality Plates and Profiles, what were you doing? Because when I met you, what was the position you had previous?
So I was a general manager for about a little over 4 years for another company in the service center. So each one, like I've only been working at 3 companies, believe it or not. And it's just funny. You said your time span was 5 to 7 years at a company. It seems like mine is always 10 years, right?
Yeah,
10 or
it's
11
always
years. Yeah. And so this is the 3rd company I've been at, and I don't move around a lot in terms of different companies, but I do move around inside the company quite a bit in my
positions. Yeah.
history. So in the last decade of my career, I was anywhere from being on the sales desk to sales manager, soil product manager, general manager. So I did a lot of different roles in that 10-year time span.
And then what made you make the jump? Like I'm sure, we were talking about looking for the new challenges. Would you have gotten the same opportunity with where you were, or was this to chase the position, or was it for the company?
A little bit of everything.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think in that answer. For me, it was knowing when it was my time, right? And knowing that I needed to grow. And sometimes it's unfortunate, but sometimes things don't always line up the way you want, right? It was
Yeah.
just going back to understanding your environment and understanding what it is that you need. And as much as I wanted to continue to stay, I knew that I needed to progress forward, right? And so for me, it was the opportunity.
Now, you are also involved with AWMI, and you've been involved with them for over 10 years now. So your career is at about a 21-year mark, you said. So half your career, you've been connected with the Association for Women in the Metal Industries group. What connected you to them 10 years ago, 11 years ago? What was it did someone bring you in? Was your work, did they send you? How did that work for you?
So at the time, my company, they sent me there. I was brand new. I was so green to the industry. And they said, hey, do you want to go to these meetings? And I thought, you know what, I said, sure. Right. And like that's always me. It was like, I always try something.
New
I may not
stuff.
stay
Yeah.
there for long. Yeah. But I'm going to try it out. And so, I went to the meetings. I listened to the speakers. I watched the women running the chapter, and I just thought, this is wonderful. At the time, like I said, I was young and I was green, and the thought of doing that one day, it was kind of a little bit intimidating. I'm not going to lie. And I thought, you know what,
Sure.
I don't know if I could run the chapter, but I'm definitely a member, right? So I jumped into the AWMI early on in my career, and it helped me network. It helped me grow. It taught me about the industry. It's funny, as big as the industry is, it's really small, right?
Yeah, it is. It's
people.
a community. Yeah.
It is a community, and it becomes a community. And what's great is, 20 years later, I'm looking back, and it's like there's so many connections. There's so many people I know that I met through the association, right? Through the AWMI, which has been huge in my career. I didn't actually decide to join the board until after my second child. A friend had reached out to me, a coworker actually, had come to me and said, you know what, we really need you. We need you on the board. We have a position that's open. We need you to fill the treasurer role. And I looked at her and I went, I like making money. I don't necessarily like,
keeping track of it.
That it I don't want to track it on the book. And I said, I don't have that skill set there. I'm like, I'm on the other end. And she said, no, I think you'd really enjoy it. We could really use you and your skill set. So I joined the board, and it was, I think, over 5 years ago. And I loved it. I mean, what it taught me, and you're never too young to join a board. Like I thought, I thought I was, like, how am I going to do that? Look at these women. But it's the women that make you better. It's having access to all the different skill sets, right? So that was kind of a misconception of mine early on, where I thought, no, I don't know enough to be relevant, right? And that's not the case, right? So these boards, you learn by the people around you, and you try something different, right? So what I like about being on the board is I found out that actually I'm not that bad at being a treasurer. It was not as daunting as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
It was challenging for sure, but it was a new skill set that I got to learn, and I got to try my hand at it. And to be honest with you, then be able to understand it now at work, right? And these are a lot of skills that you're learning it through the AWMI. You can bring back to your job, right? So it's kind of training you in advance. Like I said, you're always preparing for the next role. Sometimes you don't know when you're going to need it, right? And sometimes, you look back and go, hey, I do have experience with that. And it does help you. So from treasurer, I jumped into the vice president role, and I'm president of the Toronto chapter, which was my former role, and I previously held, and just moved into regional director right now, Northeast regional director for the AWMI. So, continuing to grow even with the association as I'm growing myself with my own career, it has helped me along the way. And I think one of the biggest things that has helped me overcome is my fear of public speaking, which a lot of people know.
Every time I've gotten you to do it, you've done a great job.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't feel that way. I've always been I think it's my introverted self going, really, I got to talk to people right now. But it was always very challenging for me. And so on the board hosting these events, like I was always the behind the scenes, like, let me create the budget, right? And like, let me like kind of drive the sales team, and let me figure this out from the kind of the leadership perspective.
Behind the desk, yeah.
But I mean, and it's funny because, being a chapter president, you are very much in front of a lot of the events, right? So you have to speak. So it has made me a lot more comfortable doing this, which has actually translated really well in my career, because as I was continuing to advance, I'd be in front of more of the executive team or the shareholders of the company, board members, right? So it's very important. It's skills that have helped me throughout my own career, right? And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. It is a big time commitment, but it pays out. It really does pay out.
It really does, yeah. I the parallels of the association with the Canadian Welding Bureau, I volunteered as a member, became treasurer. It's weird. This is weird, but I also got voted in to be treasurer, and then I got to be vice president and then president of my local chapter before I became executive director for national. Now, what I always like to tell people that are younger, that are like, why volunteer? Why be a part of these extra things? You don't get paid. You got to take time out of your day, or out of, I always say it's like 8 to 16 hours a month. Think about that, if, to give it a time capsule for what you need to invest. But one of the things that I loved so much about the association environment, any association environment, is that the roles you have in your real jobs have nothing to do with the roles that happen at this association. So you could be the president of the biggest company in town, but when you come to this meeting, I am the treasurer, you're just a member, and I need to learn. I'm going to learn these skills way ahead of time, right? Way before. If I would have waited just in my company to climb the ladder and learn these things, it would have been years, decades. But at the association, you can learn these roles, kind of fast track, because number one, associations always need help. Volunteers. They always need volunteers. They always need people to come in, and you get to be, and you get to learn, and you get to experience those things like public speaking, doing a budget, being in charge of an event, getting speakers in, all these little things that you don't realize how important these are till you're at work a year later, and suddenly you have to organize something. You're like, I know how to do this. I know how to keep track of this. I know how to talk to people, make those phone calls. Whether you like it or not is another thing, but at least you're more comfortable doing it, right?
Right. Even negotiating contracts. I mean, there's so much that you can gain, right? And the networking alone, you don't even realize. But I've utilized this network that I've built over the years, not just through the board members, but the membership, people you're meeting at events.
Absolutely.
The knowledge, right? So like I said, I've always looked for people in roles that I've wanted to achieve, and then really try to build relationships with them. And what I found was like you can meet these people at these events, right? Because in these events you'll have all different types of
Yeah.
positions in the room. And what's fantastic about it is there's usually like a common, like you're going because you're interested in either what is being presented. So there's something in common already with the people that are there, right? So it's easy to break the ice. It's easy to start having these conversations, and you never know who you're going to meet. I think, the key is getting out of that comfort zone and really experiencing what the industry has to offer. I meet a lot of people that are very much, they stick with their company and they don't kind of deviate and they don't branch out and they don't do much outside. And for me, you really need to experience it all. You really need to understand, you need to build your connections. And you actually are, when you bring all that back, those connections can help your companies, right? It's not just about the individual, it's about what you can bring back both ways for the business itself. So yeah, I definitely encourage people to get out. I'm a big fan of it. Toronto has seen a huge amount of growth in the last couple of years. They're one now, believe they are the second largest chapter in the association, and they went from probably being one of the smallest maybe 5 years ago to now being like the second largest. So it's an incredible story, and I think it's all built on community. It's all built on the women there that have that vision and they want to move it forward. And it was funny because I often told my boss, when he asked, I said, I'm running two businesses here, right? And he would look at me and he goes, we two businesses. I said, yeah, the nonprofit is a business as well. I mean, we do the exact same things. We pay taxes. We, like host events. And I said, it's important that you understand, the magnitude of the work that I do outside and the amount of connections I build within my own company because of it, right? So being able to talk to your executive team and the importance of being a part of the association, there's a lot of work internally as well that it builds. So a lot of people don't realize when you join an association, it's not only a great way for you to gain the experience and the networking that you need, but it's also, especially if your company is not involved in it, it's a great way to bring your company in with you. And it's a great way for you to get face time with potentially executive leaders that you wouldn't have had the opportunity to sit in front of. So there's a lot of benefits to it. I don't think people utilize it quite as well as they should.
Yeah, and it's very true. And one of the beautiful things I really found about AWMI is that it really capitalizes on the intersection of two common threads. Because, like if I go to FabTech USA, for example, as a huge North American steel conference, there's one common thread. We're there for the steel industry. But you narrow that down quite a bit when you go to an AWMI conference or event or chapter event, because not only is it steel trades, but it's also women, right? So now you've really narrowed down on the commonality between the people attending. I loved being an outsider at the annual event last year that I attended. I went down there, and there's times in my life where I very much appreciate and understand not having the privilege, because I am a male. I have a lot of privilege that I carry just inherently in society. The patriarchy affords me things that I'm aware of. I think a lot of people don't have that awareness, but I am aware of that ability that I have. Now, I'm at a AWMI conference. I don't have that. I'm get out of it's not for you, right? And I loved that. I loved I got a daughter, I got a sister, I got a mom. I wish they would have gotten experience more places in their lives where it was just 300 women, all powerful, all strong, all helping each other, uplifting each other. And I'm a secondary role, in my opinion, is that, not so much, awesome. And I really, really took that to heart and came back. And I remember coming back to the CWB group, like you said, you bring these things back to your company. And I was like, okay, I hooked up with this association. I went to their annual meeting. It's awesome. I'm going to bring in the rest of the company. Like we got to partner up, because that's the kind of stuff that really makes change, right? Like you got to really empower people, and it doesn't all have to be in little tiny scratchy steps. You can make some bigger leaps. Like it can happen.
Absolutely. And that feeling that you just mentioned, I felt that many times being in conference. I think it's it's hard to explain, but you come out feeling just really good, right? You come out feeling you've learned something, you've networked with some really cool people. It's a very empowering feeling, right? And to try to translate that back, doesn't always happen the way you want it to. But that's when you say, come with me next time, right?
Yeah,
you drag your boss along and you say, no, you're going to come and you're going to feel what I feel and you're going to see what I see. And I think it's important, right? I think, for me, it's always very important about understanding things from other people's perspectives, like putting yourself in other people's shoes, right? And so I'm always trying to understand my team better. And if my team said to me, I think, you need to come to this event, you need to come see this, I'm all for it. It's yes, let me understand why this is important to you, and what this does for the company as a whole. And I think it brings, a whole different sense of enlightenment, right? Like when you're actually open-minded and you're doing these things with your team, right? And it builds a stronger bond between the two.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, for sure. I mean, they're definitely, there's an importance to the association work for sure.
Now, what's coming down the road then for Daniela? Like, you got this job now, this new job, right? 4.5 months in. Tell us about your role now and what you do and what the day-to-day for that is.
Oh, it's amazing because no 2 days are the same. So the role is kind of all encompassing, but right now my main focus is building a strong team, right? So I mentioned people are my job. For the most part, the team, if you build a strong team, the results will come, right? And the company, they'll take care of your company and your customers later on down the road. So for me, it's about really getting to know the team I have and to really strengthen, right? So look at the areas, that's kind of being missed in the past. And one of my favorite things to ask people, and I think one of the things that's catching them all off guard is I ask them what they enjoy doing. I said, of all your job functions, all the things you got to do every day, I said, what's the one that you enjoy doing the most? And are you doing it? Right. And maybe it's the thing that you enjoy the most, you're not even doing. And they always look at me and they're like, what, why are you asking me this question? Right. Like nobody's really ever asked me the question.
Yeah.
But I think it's important. I think if we find what we are passionate about, I think I just lost my earbud.
I can still hear you.
Not live at all. Okay, earbuds back in.
Yeah.
But if we find what we're passionate about, we do a much better job, right? So for me, it's about really understanding if people are happy, right? And I think, culture, a lot of times culture gets a bad rap, right? And a lot of places,
It's because they don't understand
like,
it. Yeah.
No, HR makes me do it, right? Like I always hear like, oh, we got to focus on culture. But it's important. I think, it's not about like pizza lunches. It's not, it's not about those frivolous things. I think it's about, understanding the pulse of your business, right? And understanding what drives people, what motivates people, right? And working as a team, a lot of times, teams are very dysfunctional. I'm not saying that's what's happening at my place at all, but I've been through it.
But we've been through it. Everyone has, yeah.
There's no communication or there's communication breakdown. And so really understanding, how do you break those silos, right? And how do you bring the team back together? Because when the team is a well-oiled machine, that's when it runs perfectly. That's when, my job becomes obsolete, right? And then that's when I have to look for the next challenge. But yeah, so that's what I've been doing right now is really understanding the business and focusing on the people aspect of it.
I love what you said there about asking people what they like. I mean, that's something that I've seen done. I've had people do it to me and I very much appreciate it because, it's like asking the runner to swim and the swimmer to jump and the jumper to fly. Why would you do that? Like if people have some natural skill, they're going to do so much better if you tap into that. And maybe that does expose another gap that you hoped you didn't have. But as a manager, well, now you worry about that. Now that's the next thing that you're going to have to figure out how to fill or backfill or whatever it is you need to do. But forcing people into uncomfortable positions does not lead to great work.
No. I'm okay with having to backfill something if the person's not in the right role. I'm completely open to that. Like for me, I don't mind being a little bit uncomfortable now in order to find the right rhythm later, right? And I think that is so important for a company, because if you don't have the right rhythm, you're always going to be out of alignment, right? Like
That's right.
it's never
You're
going
not
to
getting
run
better.
smoothly. You're not going to get better, right? And so for
Yeah.
me, that's crucial. Like I said, I don't look at it as a problem. Like, oh no, if that person leaves, and I'm going to have to figure out what's going on there. I look at it as an opportunity. Okay, that person's not happy doing that. That means they're not going to be as productive as they could if I found somebody that really loves doing that job. And if I found somebody that really enjoys it, it's going to be far more productive.
Mm-hmm. Now, in your first 4.5 months, how much of a learning curve has this new job been for you as an incoming exterior leader? Because there's always a little bit of a spiciness to that coming into a company from the outside.
You said that so nicely too. Yeah,
I've been there. I've been there.
It's not easy to jump into a different team, especially because you have your way of doing things. I think the other key thing too is actually one of the managers I just hired. He said to me, he said it best. He says different environments suit different people, right? And sometimes if you're not in the right environment, the person doesn't thrive, right? And I really I listened to that, and I took that back, and I thought, you know what, that's right. Which also means that the environment that I came from, I can't just try to then take the way I used to manage that way and try to apply it somewhere else, right? Just because I was successful there doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be successful doing the exact same thing here. So you need to adapt to what you have, and then really understand where you are now, right? So I'm looking at it with fresh eyes, and believe me, I'm not trying to adapt everything I used to do into the new place. But I'm trying to understand how it functions and how it flows. And then from there, I really want to look at it from, okay, so from a continuous improvement aspect, because I really do enjoy making things better. It's, there's certain things that run really well. There's certain things that will need improvement. But even the stuff that runs really well, can it be maybe slightly better, right? And so I'm always wheels are always in motion. But that's where you hire really smart people, right? And you bring smart people, or you train people that have the potential, and you get them to a point where they start telling you, like, this is what I think, this is how the business should run. They start bringing the ideas to you, because it's not just about me coming up with all the ideas, right? It's about the team and building, like, I'm not the type of person that's going to say, this is how it needs to be done. I'm the type of person that says, okay, come to me and present the options, right? Like, what are the options? What is your idea, right? What do you think the best solution will be here? And oftentimes they come up with ideas, that I wouldn't have thought of, because they're doing it day in and day out, right? Yeah. So they are the experts at it, and it'd be foolish not to listen to them, right? So I think for me, it's about listening to your team, not micromanaging them, like allowing them the space to breathe, the space to come to you with ideas, and
to be creative.
Building that culture where they can come to you and they're not going to get shot down and they're not afraid, right? And I think a lot of places you see there's a lot of really good ideas out there, from the employees, and nobody really wants to say anything because there's fear that it's going to get rejected, right? And nobody wants to be rejected, and so that's not the culture I'm trying to build. So for me, it's important to, like I said, lay the right foundation, and then build from there. And I think once you have the right foundation, it may take you a little bit of time. It'll be much stronger in the long run.
Yeah. Now, I have heard a few terms throughout this interview that I know from my background. They sound like lean and Six Sigma, words, continuous improvement. Finding areas of lacking, supporting, making things that are good better, always trying to find those gaps. How important was it for you to get that type of training? Because I know for myself, that training was invaluable. And I hear people kind of bash that corporate training a lot, saying all these corporate trainings are just the same thing over and over, blah, blah, blah. And I don't believe that. I find that there's a lot of value in a lot of these training styles or courses or methods. What do you think about them?
So I did it myself actually before my company kind of rolled out with the program, but I jumped ahead. Surprise, surprise! But I jumped ahead and I went after it because it's part of who I am. I always like to think of making things more efficient. I often used to joke that like efficiency and effectiveness were like my two favorite words in the English language. But so the point is, like, I like to make things better. I mean, I think it's important, right? And so I got my Six Sigma black belt long before the company brought it in, and then the company, of course, started focusing on it. But I've used it so much. Like, I think even having the understanding of continuous improvements and ways that you can improve the process, right? Eliminate the waste, which is so key, especially in a business, right? Because a lot of times there's a lot of wasteful steps, a lot of wasteful activity that there's cost savings too, right? And so not just cost savings, but it just makes people's lives so much better, right? Yeah. So for me, the importance was always there. But I would say anybody who's thinking about doing it, I often encourage, and I've encouraged in the past my operations managers for sure to get that done. Anybody on the team that wants to go through the certification, if they have the time and want to spend the time to learn, absolutely. I mean, I don't see a downside to it. Like I said, I use it all the time. I walk through the warehouse and already, the wheels are starting to move as to, okay, so why are we doing that exactly?
What's the value stream here? Yeah.
Right. What's the flow? Is the flow making sense? And so, I think it's incredibly important.
No, and I think that continuous improvement to yourself is key, because if you can bring in that attitude of continuous improvement to yourself, how you assess, how you look, what you're learning to improve your own procedures, processes, communications, translates into your work, which then turns into work that is continuously improving or trying to find new ways and or create less waste. They go hand in hand. You can't really, I guess what I'm trying to, you can't fake it. You can't fake that type of work. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think it's, focusing on how to improve yourself, right? There's points where like I'll have kind of a lull, like with my volunteer, with work, with family. I feel like sometimes there's this point where I'm like, okay, well, I have some time now. Like I want to
take a night class.
Like let's learn something. Like let's go on and learn a new skill or get a new certificate program. And it could be totally unrelated to what I need to do at work. But it's almost like my brain goes, you're missing something. You haven't learned something in a while. You haven't read a self-help book. What are you doing? Like, feed me, right? And so it's ingrained, right? It's ingrained. If like I said, if I'm not learning, then I want to learn, right? Yeah. So I think it's a habit that maybe you kind of pick up early on, or maybe not, right? But I think it is so beneficial because you never know where you're going to use
all training
it, right?
Is valuable.
And I think all training, like even skill, like even habits, right? You can get such enjoyment, or sorry, not habits, hobbies. You can get such enjoyment out of picking up a new hobby, right? I mean, it could be, like I said, totally unrelated to what you need to do for work, but it's something that you always wanted to learn.
And it helps you. All hobbies help you. Like I remember when we, as a manager years ago, one of the things I like to implement is having professional development for all my staff. Like I feel like that's just, as a leader, you have to give your staff space and time to learn on their own. And and it's not me telling you what to learn. It's you asking me, I want to take this. Yeah. Or, and I remember years ago, I had an employee ask me, well, can I use this for yoga? And I was like, I see absolutely 100% everything awesome about that. Because if you are physically fit and feel better and breathe and relax and can deal with stress, you're going to 100% do better work for me. So, it's removing those barriers for people to have that self-improvement, because number one, they're going to trust you as a leader because you got their back. And number two, they're going to want to work a little bit harder for you because you are allowing them to be more than just a job, right?
Absolutely. I think, you need to break away from the societal views on things sometimes. And you said yoga, and at the last place I worked, I had a yoga instructor come in and actually teach us proper stretching not just the office, I had the warehouse.
Yeah.
Everybody, we
Awesome.
went out and we did proper stretching throughout the day, and how important it is to just kind of
Mm-hmm.
to pay attention to that kind of thing. And I remember at the time, they're like, "You're doing yoga?" It's like, wow, that's forward thinking of you. And I was like, not really. And I said, understanding, the benefit to it. And I had some very skeptical employees at the time as well, going, "Really? You're making me do yoga?" And I said, "It's not yoga. Just do it." And
Yeah,
afterwards, they came
yeah.
back to me and they're like, wow, like I feel so much better. And I said, of
Mm-hmm.
course you do, right? And like you're taking care of you now. And I'm, and I think in a leadership role, if you make it okay for them to care about that kind of stuff, right? It sends a different message. It sends a message that, I do value you and I value your health. And I think it's important that we take care of each other, right? And that is key. And even though it may be looked on as really, that's out there, and like, not really.
Yeah, I need the best version of you to show up at work. So, and I mean, I even do that. Like, I mean, sometimes I look at my leadership style and I think, oh, I might be setting some bad examples, but I mean, there's days where I'm overwhelmed, right? There's days that I'm overwhelmed, and I don't want to be that boss that's like, oh, you got to put in your 80 hours this week or else you're not worth anything to the company type of attitude. Because I don't see how that helped the generation before me. Honestly, I don't know if it got them anywhere further than anybody else to do that to themselves. So, there's days that I'll have my staff meeting in the morning and I'll be like, I don't feel well today. I think I'm going to take a couple hours off this afternoon and just lie down. And that's fair, because what's the point of me as your leader trying to do something if I don't feel well? I'm not going to do it well, and it's not fair to all my staff. Let's regroup, let's talk, let's think, and I'll talk to you this afternoon. New fresh hats on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's important, I think, for the leader to model that behavior, right? And so for me, I'm I remember the times when I first started. If you wanted to get ahead, the conception was that, your job is 8 to 5. But if you want to get ahead, you do not leave at 5 o'clock, because then that's the message,
Mm-hmm.
clear message to management. And then this was communicated, like an actual word communicated, that you were not interested in getting a promotion. Right. And I always thought, man, like, so that means my, whatever, my 8.5 hours that I have to work, and I have to show that I'm working even harder than that, beyond that, that to show that I'm ambitious and driven and that I want a promotion. I'm glad that we're starting to move away from that,
Yeah,
because it wasn't balanced. I mean, it burnt people out. It caused people to leave. And I think it was the wrong message that we're sending our team. It was,
it is. Yeah.
for me, I think that a lot of the issues we had with a lot of people, just, not engaged, is because they were probably feeling, and I remember feeling it at the same time, that you're overworked, right? You're underappreciated
Mm-hmm.
and overworked. And I think now it's a matter of, us being aware as leaders that we got to do better, especially for our teams, and we got to be mindful of, if they are being overworked or not, right? And you have to, as a leader, I think you're responsible to say something and to do something, not just to say
Absolutely.
something,
Yeah.
but to do something, right? And to help them out. And so my thing is, I always ask people, what can I do to help you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm leaving and I still see employees that are in the office, and I'm guilty too. I stay late sometimes too when I'm working on something and I want to get it done
But it's because you
without
want to
going
do
home
it.
with the,
Yeah.
well, you do, right? And then without the screaming kids in the background, right? Like, I want to get
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
my work done. But when I see people and I'm leaving and they're still there, and I always say, don't stay too late, right? And it's just mindful that, I see you, I know you're working hard, and sometimes it's a matter, if you see them like time and time again, like if you're there every night, call it out and say, is there
Yeah.
something I can do to help you?
Yeah.
Like,
Or take this
is it
Friday
time
off.
management?
Like, yeah.
Yeah, is it workload? What is it?
Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
causing you to be here every single night? Because I feel responsible for that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't want people to be burnt out. I want people to be at their best.
Right. And this is also like my angle on it, because I'm very much burned the patriarchy. The patriarchal systems favor the long hours to men. The majority of single parenting done in North America is by women. The majority of caregiving of children is by women. The majority of daycare Hours are regulated around the 9 to 5 workday, which does not favor women. So when it's I want you to work 60 hours this week, or I want you to stay late, or I want you to work Saturdays, or I want you to work these weird times, that favors men. It always favors men statistically. So you are immediately with that mentality forcing women into a tough spot where they're not able, like if like you said, it was communicated to you, you got to stay late here to get to get ahead. Well, if you got kids and you're a single mom, that's not an option. So you've basically told your staff you're never going to get ahead because your family's holding you back. That is a terrible position to put someone into, right? So if you want to be equitable, it can't be based off of that, right? It's got to be based off
Absolutely.
work, not work done, work expected, right?
Right, and it sets people up at such a disadvantage, right? And male or women, like because it could go either way, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
single parent could be the dad, right?
Well, I was a
And
single dad
so
for years, so and
yeah,
I remember being like complaining because I got 2 kids and I'm single dad, and I'm like, what am I complaining about? I'm still a male. I still make more money per hour. I still get, so I'm experiencing a slight disprivilege of my situation, whereas 60% of women deal with this every day. So you know what I mean?
but it's still inequity, no matter which way you look
It
at
is,
it. I mean,
yeah.
it's still not right, and I think shifting that mindset is important to move forward. And I'm glad that we're starting to see that, right? And there's more of a focus on mental health. There's
Mhm.
because I think the reason, and everybody's like, well, in my day we didn't have mental health, and I'm like, well, so maybe there was a reason why
Yeah.
that we have it
Suicide
now.
rates were really high. Like, I mean, geez.
I mean, the problem had to start somewhere.
Yeah,
Right? So,
exactly.
but
Now,
it is. It like I said, it's one of those things where you choose the leader that you want to be, and I think it is important for the team to see that, right? And if you want to be that, for the longest time, I was scared to be that nice or that kind or like empathetic person, because that wasn't what was out there, right? I mean, what you saw
yeah,
was the exact opposite in leadership.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think now you're seeing that it's okay. It's okay to be nice. Nice doesn't mean weak. There's
That's right.
no way that I'm a weak person at all. Everything that I face, it just means that I will put myself in your shoes. I will
Mhm.
try to see it from your perspective, right? And I think in a way that's stronger than not doing it.
Absolutely. Being able to having a high longevity list of you being able to bend and not break is way, way better than being rigid, because you're gonna snap eventually, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now what's in the future for Daniela? What do you got your eyes on next? I mean, you just started this new job, so I'm sure you got plenty of work for you for the next few years, but you're still a young woman and you still got a long career ahead of you. So, what are some of the things that you aspire to do, or even not necessarily even with the company you're at, but even with AWMI or other projects?
Oh my gosh, for me right now, and it's funny because I'm always looking so far ahead, and you know, it is very new, the job, but I'm always thinking what the next step is. So
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. There's a lot on the plate. There's a lot there that I don't know if I'm yet willing to share with the world.
Yeah. Cool, though.
But keep in
Cool.
mind, there's always plans. There's
Mm-hmm.
always a step forward in where I want to go and what I want to do, because it's just the way I built, right? And
Mm-hmm.
for me right now is building up quality placement profiles, building up the team and strengthening the team, and that's fun, right? And I think it's presenting me with some challenge, which I enjoy absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows? Who knows what's next for me? I think for me, it will be, uh, you know,
It'll be
hard
awesome.
to say at this point. It will be awesome. Thank you.
And what about with AWMI? Regional director now. You are more involved with planning and nurturing the chapters within your region. How's that? And what's the world look like for AWMI for you going forward?
So this is so much fun for me, this new role, because before it was just Toronto, and now it's Toronto and New York and Mid Atlantic and Pittsburgh. So there's 4 chapters within our region, and it's fun because each one of us, or each one of them, I should say, has different sets of challenges, has different strengths. So it is so much fun getting to know each one of the chapters. Right now, we have our spring regional coming up in March in Pittsburgh. Just bringing the teams together. There's such a wide range of talent among all the ladies, and I think you learn every single time from these sessions. So really, being on the international board of directors right now is new, right? It's only been a couple of months in this role, so there's lots to learn, and then exposure, of course, to the international AWMI international board. There's going to be a lot to learn from there too. So who knows? I mean, maybe in a couple of years or so, I might be on the international board for AWMI as well, and leading from that aspect. But definitely exciting for me. Lots of learning, lots of growth, which is exactly where I want to be. So
good. Well, I'm glad everything's coming up, Daniela, for you. I'm glad that these opportunities are there, and I'm glad I met you because I'm enjoying watching your trajectory and what you do and how you do it. I think it's a great example and baseline for people to launch themselves from going forward.
Absolutely, and there's so much work that the AWMI and the CWB I think are looking forward to in the near future. So I can't wait to see what we do next.
Awesome. Any last words of wisdom out there for the faithful followers as we wrap up with the interview? We have I touched on intersectionality. That's something that I always am very much trying to think about when I look at any situation, and you cover many cross sections of society that I think are important. You're a woman, you're a strong leader, you are an advocate, you're a volunteer. For yourself, a young woman coming up, 18, 19 years old, coming out of high school perhaps, what's the pitch to the steel industry? What would you say as a piece of advice for them looking to get into a great industry for a career?
I would say for me, it's a couple key things, which is, don't be afraid of trying new things, right? And it doesn't mean you have to stay there forever. It just, it could lead to something really exciting, right? So early on, if you're into a role and you want to put your hand up for another assignment, I found that extremely helpful, not only getting noticed, but also in learning new skills. And the second thing I would say would be don't let the thought of somebody saying no to you prevent you from asking the question.
Right.
If I had to count how many times people said no, and some politely and some not so politely, I would never get to where I am today. I think the key is continue to ask the question, continue to ask people for some time, to spend some time and maybe, pull information from them. I'm on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me. I completely get it. It's scary to ask people for help sometimes. But if you really want to get into a role and you really want to understand what it's about, I encourage people to do that and to reach out. Like I said, you may get some no's, and sometimes people are just really busy and they can't help. But other times, you'll find some individuals that are willing to share with you.
Yeah, I've noticed in my career that once you get to exactly what you're saying, to being more comfortable with asking, the amount of people that are out there willing to help is a lot higher than you expect. People are a lot more forthcoming with help than you realize.
And it's intimidating to ask, and I think that prevents a lot of us from doing so. I say that because it took me a long time to get to that stage where I was comfortable asking the questions, and sometimes you don't know what to ask for, right? And then that could be the most challenging part of asking. But yeah, you know what? I think don't let it prevent you. Still ask, and if you get a no, bounce back. Don't let that sit on you. Now, if I get no's, I just kind of move on. Like it's like it rolls right off me. I don't even feel it.
Next.
I just go for the next.
Awesome, Danielle. Any shout outs you'd like to say to anybody before we take off?
Just my awesome team at Quality Plates and Profiles. I can't do what I do without them. So
Awesome. Thanks so much. I love all the wisdom that you've given us for being a young person. You have, I say young because I'm older, so I'm allowed to say that. But you've been inspirational even to me and to the people I know, and my Daniela, who loves working with you. We've had great interactions with you, and we look forward to working with you for a long, long time.
Sounds really good. Thank you so much, Max, for this opportunity.
Awesome. And for all the people that have been following along here on the podcast, the information for Daniela will be available when the podcast hits. Like she said, she's also on LinkedIn, so you can reach out to her if you'd like. And also AWMI is a fantastic group. Check them out online. They have a great website. They're also on LinkedIn. All the chapters also have representations. We work with them nationally, all across North America, and also directly the Toronto chapter works with the Toronto chapter of the CWBA. So there are lots of great interactions there. If you're a woman listening, make sure you get involved, get into the trades. We need you. We need you badly. There is, even though you're hearing about these crazy things happening and the disruption of the systems, that's not going to change the amount of work that needs to happen in this country. So we really need all hands on deck. So sign up for whatever programs you can find, get involved, ask the questions, and of course, reach out to us anytime you need us. Until then, I'll see you at the next episode, and take care.
We hope you enjoyed the show.